August 6th, 1945. Hiroshima, 8:15 a.m. The city has awakened. People are heading to work. The streets are bustling. Another day begins. Then, a single plane appears in the sky, and a single bomb falls. In a matter of seconds, tens of thousands of people were wiped out. Then the mushroom cloud rose. The world changed. It took 3 years to build this bomb. $2 billion were spent. Hundreds of thousands of people worked on it, and all in secrecy. But consider this: Germany possessed the same science. Moreover, the majority of the founders of atomic physics were German or European. Werner Heisenberg was there. The German nuclear program had begun in 1939, 4 years before America's. So why couldn't the Germans do it first? Or what if they had? This question is one of history's darkest what-if questions. What actually happened? 1939. Germany was a world leader in atomic physics. Otto Hahn had discovered nuclear fission. Werner Heisenberg was one of the founders of quantum mechanics. The German nuclear program had begun, but the program never reached the desired pace. Why? First reason: brain drain. With Hitler's rise to power, Jewish and dissident scientists fled Germany. Einstein, Fermi, Szilard, Teller, they all went to America, and they formed the backbone of the Manhattan Project. Second reason: miscalculation. German physicists miscalculated the amount of uranium needed for a nuclear bomb. They believed an impossibly large quantity was required. This error slowed down the program. Third reason: prioritization issues. Germany prioritized projects that yielded quick results in its war economy. Long-term nuclear research could not secure funding. Fourth reason: sabotage. The heavy water facility in Norway, critical to Germany's nuclear program, was repeatedly sabotaged by Norwegian resistance fighters and British special forces. Result: Germany never came close to building an atomic bomb. The United States succeeded in 1945, and the war ended. But what if these 4 factors had been different? The moment history was made. 1939. Berlin. German physicists are gathered at a secret meeting. They have a calculation in hand, and this calculation could change everything. What if Jewish scientists hadn't left the country? What if Einstein, Fermi, and the others were still there? Or what if the heavy water plant in Norway hadn't been sabotaged? The facilities are operating at full capacity. Heavy water production continues uninterrupted. What if there hadn't been a calculation error? The correct amounts were known. Uranium enrichment began. The project gained momentum. 1943. Germany's secret nuclear facility. Just hours remain until the first critical experiment. The scientists have withdrawn. The reactor has been started. They succeeded. The first nuclear chain reaction took place. Upon hearing the news, the high command rushed to the maps. We began designing the weapon. We could have made a bomb, but how long would it take? And where would it be dropped? 1944. The bomb is ready. The debate over the target began. London, Moscow. This decision would determine the course of history. London was chosen because taking out England would end the war immediately. The Western Allies would fall apart. London was unaware of anything that morning. The air raid sirens went off, but this time was different. A single plane, a single bomb, and the heart of London was obliterated. The news reverberated across the globe. In Washington, in Moscow. No one knew what to do. The British government had been evacuated from London, but Britain did not fall. The resistance continued. In the US, the Manhattan Project was proceeding at a frantic pace. It was no longer a race. It was a desperate scramble. The Soviets, meanwhile, accelerated their own nuclear program. Intelligence networks were working frantically. They needed every bit of information. The Germans were preparing a second bomb. Was the target Moscow this time, or another city? The Allies had to make a decision. Would they surrender, or would they risk everything and continue fighting? America did not give up. "We can end this war too," it said. And unlimited resources were poured into the Manhattan Project. The first domino had fallen, but this domino was very different from the others, because this was a point of no return. Alternative scenario. The first domino. London had been bombed. What would happen now? Britain did not surrender. But what could it do? The British people were in shock. But at no point in history had the British been so united. Anger had overcome panic. The Normandy plans were put on hold. D-Day was now impossible. The Western Front could not be opened. The Soviets were fighting alone in the East. The Western Front had not opened. The burden fell entirely on them. Germany had now invited them to the negotiating table. The terms were harsh, but the table had been set. America refused. The Soviets refused. The war would continue. But how? The Manhattan Project reached its conclusion in early 1945. America now had a bomb too, and the target was set. But where would this bomb be dropped? On a city in Europe. This decision carried both a military and a moral burden. Berlin was chosen as the target in the summer of 1945, and Germany received London's response. 2 nuclear bombs, 2 cities, and the world teetered on the brink of nuclear war. Germany surrendered, but this victory had never felt so bitter. 2 cities had been destroyed. Japan has also surrendered. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed again. The war was over. But what kind of world remained? 4 cities had been destroyed: London, Berlin, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. The world had not yet grasped the meaning of this. The Soviets tested their nuclear weapons in 1946, long before the United States, because they were far more compelled to do so. And the nuclear arms race began, faster, more dangerous, and much earlier. The Cold War began much earlier and was far more dangerous, because both sides had seen what the bomb could do. It was now known that nuclear weapons could be used. This knowledge turned every crisis into a potential annihilation. The world survived, but it was never the same again. The nuclear shadow loomed over everything. The first domino had fallen, and this domino was different from all the others. An irreversible piece. Domino effect. How would the world change? 4 cities had been destroyed. The war was over. But what was left now? And how had the world changed? The destruction of London accelerated the collapse of the British Empire. Perhaps not by years, but by months. India declared its independence in 1945. Britain no longer had the strength to hold on to it. All the colonies declared their independence like dominoes. European colonialism collapsed with the end of the war. The UN was established, but this time with a very different spirit. To ban nuclear weapons, to protect humanity, a global treaty banning nuclear weapons was signed. But did the signatories truly adhere to this treaty? The Soviets signed the treaty, but continued their secret program. So did the United States. There was no trust. The Cold War began much earlier and was far more tense because nuclear weapons were now a reality. The nuclear threat was much more concrete during the Korean War. Both sides had proven they could use these weapons. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 nearly escalated into a nuclear war. In this alternative timeline, it could have happened. In this alternative timeline, humanity might have experienced a nuclear war, and it's uncertain whether we'd be here today. But there was a positive effect as well. Having witnessed the true devastation of nuclear weapons, humanity was far more determined to pursue peace. Perhaps in this alternative, nuclear weapons would have been banned much sooner. because humanity had witnessed the cost firsthand. And perhaps in this alternative, the world would be a much safer place today. The irony of tragedy, or the exact opposite. The nuclear arms race would have spiraled out of control, and humanity would have destroyed itself. It's impossible to know which direction it would take, because human nature is still debating whether we can learn from history. Science has given us power, but it's not science that determines how we use that power. It's us. If the German nuclear program had succeeded, how would those in control have used that power? Even asking that question is terrifying. Historians say this: in this alternative, the war would still have been won, but the cost to humanity would have been far heavier than it is today, and the millions of people paying that price would have been the victims of politicians' or generals' decisions. Today, nuclear weapons still exist. 9 countries, tens of thousands of weapons. And in this alternative, those numbers would have been much higher. Would humanity have survived in this alternative? No one can know. But we must ask, one of the greatest gifts real history has given us. The side that first created those bombs was the one that used them responsibly. What would the world look like today? So what would the world look like in this alternative timeline in 2024? If humanity still exists, London might have been rebuilt, but it was never the same again. Once a city's spirit is destroyed, that spirit never returns. Europe would have taken a very different shape. Britain's power would have been shattered. France would have risen to prominence. Germany would have been fragmented. The European Union might have been much stronger, because a Europe that had experienced nuclear devastation would have been far more in need of unity. Colonialism would have collapsed much earlier. Asia and Africa would have gone through a very different process today. Nuclear weapons might have been banned, or maybe not, but the shadow of these weapons would have been felt much more heavily. And Hiroshima. In this alternative, Hiroshima would still be bombed, but humanity had already experienced this. The pain would have been doubled. Today we live under the shadow of nuclear weapons. In this alternative, that shadow would have been much darker, but humanity would have survived, because humanity has always survived. That is the greatest strength. And perhaps in this alternative, humanity would have learned peace much earlier than in real history, or perhaps it wouldn't have. And asking this question is the heaviest legacy history has left us. What do historians think about this scenario? Most historians agree on this point. It was technically possible for Germany to develop a nuclear bomb, but for that to happen, several critical factors would have had to align perfectly. It was essential that there be no brain drain, that heavy water facilities be preserved, and that the necessary calculations be performed correctly. On the other hand, historians also note that the German nuclear program never matched the Manhattan Project's organizational efficiency in terms of resource utilization. The manpower and funding mobilized by the United States far exceeded Germany's capabilities. But the most important question is this: if Germany had developed this bomb, would it have used it? The vast majority of historians say yes, and this yes represents history's darkest possibility. What actually happened? Germany never came close. And this reality is perhaps the greatest stroke of luck history has given us. What if the Nazis had developed the atomic bomb first? The answer to this question is different from the others, because in this alternative, the outcome of the war might not have changed, but humanity's future would have been radically altered. The use of nuclear weapons, even once, opens a door from which there is no return. And who opened that door, how they opened it, and why they opened it, all of that determines everything. In real history, those who opened that door at least wanted humanity to survive. In this alternative, who would have opened it, and what would they have wanted? This is the heaviest of the what-if questions. In the next section, We're heading to North Africa. What would have happened if Rommel had won at El Alamein?